This is a commentary video on my poem Madness is a Form of Love, which you can easily watch recited in just 1 minute on my channel on another video. This is just a very simple almost billboard commercial type summation or broad outline and attempt to boldly and clearly convey my feelings, and also a little bit of insight about the topic of mental health and what it means to me. So, see the title of the poem in the first line, and also the title of my first book, are the words "Madness is a Form of Love." And that's important because when you are approaching any subject from the point of view of healing, particularly mental illness or madness, is always important, whether you're dealing with the subject in general or specific individuals, to portray it in the best light. If you're talking to an individual who is unhappy, demoralized, probably feels oppressed by society in some way and trampled on, and has low self-value, because these are all the true causes of human unhappiness and so-called mental illness. Well, when you're approaching such a person, the very first thing you have to make sure that you do is to speak to them in a light that doesn't further sap their already highly trampled upon sense of self-worth. So, whether you're dealing with the topic in general, with an individual, you portray it in, possibly the most beautiful light that you possibly can. Even if it seems, very tragic to you, and it makes you recoil a little bit, instinctively, and you feel great pity and fear, when you come across this, something like mental illness, serious mental illness or madness, or an individual who's afflicted by it, because most people will feel, fear and pity, because they realize that it could potentially happen to them, so they have like a defensive reaction. They don't want to get too close to it, so they won't be too loving towards it. They won't want, they'll have a resistance to portraying it in a kind and beautiful light, because they don't want to get too close to it. It might be contagious. They're not actually 100% comfortable with that side of themselves. What might lie in wait for them on that road. But if you want to write, a beautiful poem, or be a genuine healing influence on these people, or in society in general, particularly in relation to this topic, or any topic, you have to have a will to, at the very beginning, at least validate it and portray it, probably in as beautiful light as you can. So madness is a form of love. And you see, when you begin to think like this and you begin to practice this kind of thing, you can easily see that what you're saying is not just idle flattery, even if you think it might be yourself at first, but it actually has a great deal of truth in it. Because, madness is a form of love. And I can explain that. First of all, it's not such a strange thing to say, because it's very commonly said that love is a form of madness. So if love is a form of madness, a certain form of madness must also be a form of love. That's just basic logic. And does the fact that love is a form of madness mean that people don't adore love and, secretly or openly worship it and long for it and envy those who have it? But there's much more in this phrase than that. Because madness is a form of love in so many ways. Firstly, as I was just saying, what is called mental illness, various kinds of dysfunctional behavior or thought patterns, highly associated with, simple human unhappiness. They are inextricably connected to a need for more genuine love and kindness and validation. Validation is it's a term that mental health professionals may use, at least the slightly more cognizant ones. So it's perhaps not the best term, but it will do. And that is a form of validation is a form of love. And you see, mental patients are not different from other human beings. And in reality, if you stop dehumanizing them or turning them over to technical experts, so to speak, and think of them in their natural humanity, and if you have some self-knowledge yourself, and you are of a just and reasonable enough disposition and fair enough disposition to apply that to your fellow human beings, not think that you're the only person in the world who craves or deserves, recognition, validation, worship, love. If you don't think you're the only person in the world who deserves these things, but you fairly and reasonably apply that logic to everybody else, because in fact that is what all human beings, want. And you recognize that, when you get these things, validation, you generally become a bit more gentle and kinder and less angry at the world. And you're probably a bit nicer to be around at those times. And you'll feel better, you'll feel happier, and you'll be more functional. And this is one of the main things that mental health patients really, really need. The whole therapy industry is, based upon a tacit recognition, of this fact. But it's often also concealed. And there are countercurrents which completely undermine it and swim in completely the opposite direction. And nobody bats an eyelid. Poor mental patients are being totally ridden roughshod over and dehumanized, reduced to caged animals, inhuman animals, incapable of reason, so to speak, the distinctly unique faculty that gives human beings their distinct dignity. Nobody bats an eyelid. And these are the most vulnerable and miserable and dysfunctional and, neglected people, because they come from, dysfunctional backgrounds where they did not get the basic input they needed. And now instead of, making up that deficit, we do the exact opposite. And we don't even give them a glimpse of it. We take whatever glimpse they would have got in their natural growing up and getting away from their bad beginnings. We rob them of that opportunity by locking them in completely stagnant, isolated wards, which, to all intents and purposes, mimic, hell on earth, and, isolation from God, so to speak, from society, So, in reality, madness is, it's a cry for love. It's a cry for exactly what I'm saying is being taken away and robbed from these people. And when people feel recognized and they get attention, attention for who they are, real attention, real appreciation for exactly what they are and who they are and what they could be, the best of themselves, then they will be appeased. Their anger will be appeased. And you will start to see better things from them. So, it may seem, that these people are asking for too much, in your opinion. Why should they get, more attention just because they can't control themselves and they throw their toys out of the pram and, throw tantrums and, maybe endanger themselves or others. You're thinking, well, why should they get attention? Well, first of all, it's important to recognize that, if you're being honest and genuine about medicine, about healing, then whether you like it or not and think they deserve it or not, you have to recognize, well, that is in fact what they need, what they're asking for, and what is going to help them. You have to distinguish between what you think people deserve and what, is genuine medicine and genuinely good for people. And And the next question is, why are you so mean? Why do you feel so mean that you're not willing to give these people basic respect, recognition, validation, love, which they've been lacking in their lives? And why are you so mean? And you don't recognize that, love is not really, it's not a scarce commodity necessarily. The scarcer you make, the meaner you are with it, the scarcer you make it. And there's a lot more room for generosity and kindness, which will breed more generosity and kindness. See, when people are claiming, to be, like I say in this poem, messiahs, when your youth are claiming to be messiahs and have divine revelations, etc., or be the reincarnation of Jesus. See, obviously, this is a cry. This is a terrible cry for attention and for love. Which is not to say that these claims are necessarily invalid, but whether they are invalid or not, whether they're valid or invalid, you have to be totally inhuman and disconnected with your humanity not to recognize that what these people are asking for and what they really need is just some recognition and love and attention, which they're actually desperate for. So they're making all these extravagant claims because nobody is actually paying them any attention. Nobody has ever paid them any attention and given them the interest and nurturing that they require. So this is just a basic human fact, which if you're not aware of, you just totally sever from your own humanity. It is obviously it doesn't need to be said. I don't know if I should say this, but if you look at the history of human thought and philosophy, this need for human recognition or human love is so absolutely well established. You have to be, I don't know what you would have to be, where you would have to grown up, what kind of terrible upbringing you would have to have, not to have this center of your thought. I mean, are we so estranged from our Christian heritage? We do not understand these basic psychological human needs and facts. We do the exact opposite all over society. In precisely the professions, it's supposed to be called the caring professions. So those are two, already mentioned two ways that madness is really is a form of love. Well, let me just expand, and on the next one, because you shouldn't think that, in terms of pure neediness, and like these people are just like, need are demanding lots of attention again, because that itself is that is a wrong interpretation, because real love is not just about giving, it's also about wanting. So the people who want the most are also in many ways the most they themselves are the most loving. It's not just that they want love and they're demanding and and spoiled, or want like the spoiled children who are wanting too much attention. In reality, wanting is itself a great giving, or wanting is itself a great form of love, because if people are honest with themselves and not totally neurotic, messed up, and bitter and mean, then there is almost nothing better, and nothing feels more like love than to be really wanted. So it's they're the people who are mentally ill, or who are begging for attention and recognition. They're just one side of the coin, one side of the equation of the relationship, which is equally necessary and satisfying from both directions. There are people who are absolutely desperate to give love and attention and recognition, just as there are people who are desperate to receive it. And this is what love is about. It's about a mutual need of giving and receiving. And unless there's some terrible mismatch, this is the most satisfying and beautiful and fulfilling thing in the world. This is the basis of society. It's not a form of mental illness itself. Love is not a form of mental illness itself, but it's the basis of society, mutual human need for genuine connection with one another. And rather than thinking of, mentally ill people or people who are desperate for attention and recognition as a great drain on you, you can equally begin to see them, and many people will see them. They only think a bit differently, perhaps, as not an enormous drain, but an enormous resource of people who really just want your input, and are there to form real connections with. So, I mean, mentally ill or mad people are like a great shining light of human need, emotional need, which is which is an amazingly beautiful thing. And they're like an icon. I see them as like an icon, or an avatar, or a symbol for this human longing for connection. Now, it's a very beautiful thing, and it's exactly what poems should be written about. So madness is a form of love. It comes from up above. It is wilder than the rose and gentler than the dove. So, madness often is gentler than the dove. These are very often very sensitive people, very gentle people who are brutalized and brutalized and traumatized by the brutal world that we live in. They're gentler and more sensitive, and if you try, you can have much more sensitive and fulfilling, meaningful, emotionally attuned relationships with them than you can have with normal people. They are like emotional conductors, whereas the rest of society is a group of like hard-shelled, atomized individuals who don't have time or the will or don't prioritize human connection and genuine emotional sensitivity. And that allows them to function and be successful in their careers. But it also leaves them as really pathetic shells of human beings who have far less really going for them than the average mental health patient. Because, the meaning of human life is not to be, a good cog in an office place and, in a workforce. These are laughable things which in a few hundred years they'll be completely scorned. They'll view the average, even CEO probably of, a big company today as like a tiny little pathetic ant, in the same way as like we view, the illiterate, maybe the illiterate, factory workers of, the 19th century, or the slaves of, ancient Greece. We look at these as, pathetic, poor, very sad, tragic, pitiable individuals, but we don't see them with any real, value and respect, particularly. They're slaves, and we think of slavery as degrading, as it genuinely is in most cases. If you look at the average, industrial factory worker of the 19th century, well, their humanity is sapped out of them by the inhuman conditions with which they're forced to work. This is not ennobling and make them more beautiful. I mean, there could be a very small aspect of that, and it could be worth highlighting from time to time, but overall not. And in the same way, the successful cogs in the workforce of today will be viewed as terrible, as terrible tragedies of human beings. Either by the more enlightened people today, as they probably are already, or in a couple of hundred years' time, hopefully, when society has actually progressed to moved on and human beings are allowed to manifest and realize their true, full, all-round humanity, and have genuine emotional, sacred connections with one another. So, see, in many ways, the mental health patient is still more ripe for genuine, ecstatic connection, or some kind of meaningful connection, emotional connection, than, supposedly successful career people.
stones of a house come to life and kill those inside. Statues of bronze begin to breathe. A world is born, another dies. Decaying flesh gives birth to flies. Demons and angels before our eyes. Black sun gleaming, black sun dreaming. Columns tumble, faiths all crumble. Black sun rises, black sun blazes. A world is born, another dies. Demons and angels before our eyes. Decaying flesh gives birth to flies. Black sun gleaming, black sun dreaming. Columns tumble, faiths all crumble. A world is born, another dies.